Am I the a-hole for telling my half-sister I can't have a relationship with her? Sorry for the long rant. I'm just really lost and need to give a lot of context. Fake names. When I, 21F, was very little, my dad had an affair with a woman called Elizabeth, which resulted in my half-sister Jalen, 20F. I also have three other siblings, Morgan, 29F, Ruth, 28F, and Ashton, 26M, that don't really have a relationship with our dad since they were old enough to understand and remember a life with our parents married. The fallout from that affair didn't just break my parents' marriage. It basically split our family into two different timelines. My older siblings remember the before. They remember the house when it was a home, not just a structure where two people coexisted. But for me, the youngest, I was born into the chaos. I was barely a toddler when the fighting reached its peak, and by the time I was old enough to actually comprehend what a family was, mine had already been dismantled and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. When the divorce was finalized, my dad, Elizabeth, and Jalen moved to another nearby town 30 minutes away, so we weren't exactly close by to the point of attending the same elementary or high school, but we saw each other quite often because we had to go every weekend to our dad's. That really sucked because especially when my siblings and I got older, we couldn't really make plans on the weekends with our friends since we would be gone Friday evening till Sunday afternoon. Every Friday at 4 p.m., I would feel this pit in my stomach as my dad's car pulled into the driveway. It felt like being checked into a prison for 48 hours. My friends would be talking about the movies they were seeing or the sleepovers they were planning, and I would just have to sit there, nodding along, knowing I'd be 30 minutes away in a house that felt like a museum dedicated to my father's betrayal. Whenever me or my siblings had events/birthdays/competitions on the weekends, we would have to go to our dad's home, get ready there, and then he would drive us, so my stepsister felt included. It was performative. I remember being 12, getting ready for a regional choir competition, and instead of just going from my house with my mom, I had to spend the night at my dad's. I had to get dressed in their guest room while Elizabeth hovered at the door, offering tips on my hair that felt like insults, and Jalen sat on the bed watching me, her presence a constant reminder that my dad had a new favorite. He'd drive us all in his SUV, Jalen wearing a shirt that matched my school colors, and it felt like my identity was being hijacked just so he could feel like a successful family man. The real issue started when my siblings started turning 18 and deciding not to come anymore since legally, my dad couldn't force them. So from 14 to 18 I still had to go, but alone, to give my dad some credit, and since I was starting to act out for not being able to make plans with friends on the weekends, he allowed me to stay at my mom's 2 weekends a month. But being there sucked all the joy out of me because I was alone facing Jalen and Elizabeth. My dad didn't get home around 7 p.m. because he worked late as an engineer, and Elizabeth was a som. That meant I spent hours every Saturday in a house where the air felt thick with resentment. I dreaded listening to them make digs at my mom and sisters for their appearances. Elizabeth would sit at the kitchen island, sipping tea, and say things like, "It's such a shame your mother doesn't take care of herself anymore. A woman shouldn't just give up after a certain age." I shot those comments down every single time. "My mom looks great, Elizabeth, and she's busy raising 4 kids without a partner." I'd snap back. But they would keep going, talking my ear off about my mom and siblings being too old to keep up with me or understand my generation. I guess since Jalen and I were closer in age than to my siblings, they expected that alone time they had with me to be enough to turn me against my mom and siblings. They tried buying my affection. They'd give me expensive gifts, latest tech, designer bags, things they knew my mom couldn't prioritize on her budget. Elizabeth would say, "We just want you to have the best, honey. We know things are tight over there." It had the opposite result. It made me resent them even more because it felt like they were trying to put a price tag on my loyalty. Once I turned 18, I had a heart-to-heart with my dad. I sat him down in that sterile living room and told him I wasn't going to keep visiting if his wife and daughter were here because I felt trapped with people who hated my mother. I told him how they talked about her when he wasn't there. He looked devastated, but he didn't defend them. He just sat there in silence. My mom has never been anything but graceful towards them. She always told us to give Jalen a chance, since we were the only siblings she would ever have. Elizabeth had to get her uterus removed due to a tumor a few years after having Jalen, so she was it. My mom didn't want Jalen to pay for the sins of the parents, but I couldn't find that same grace. My siblings sometimes had dinners with my dad, but they decreased over time, because Elizabeth demanded to come as well. My siblings refused, since they just wanted alone time with dad, and since he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, those dinners very rarely occurred. He was terrified of her. She'd threaten him with consequences at home if he excluded her from his family. Every graduation or event became very headache-inducing because Elizabeth always wanted to upstage my mom. At Morgan's wedding, she wore a dress that was borderline white and tried to name herself mother of the bride during the reception planning. She made backhanded comments about the flowers being cheap and the venue being quaint, her code for small. It got so heated that my uncles actually had to escort her outside. Ruth didn't even invite her to her wedding, which in return made our father only attend the ceremony and not the reception since Elizabeth threatened him with divorce. He sat in the back pew, looked at his watch, and left before the first dance. I watched Ruth's face fall when she saw his empty chair. I'll never forgive him for that. Last year in Ashton's graduation, he didn't even attend. We were all there, looking for him in the crowd. We found out later that the day before he was supposed to arrive, Jalen tried to commit and was admitted to the hospital. To say things have been tense would be an understatement. Last time I spoke to her was a few days after her admission, when I went to check on her. I walked into the hospital hallway, feeling a weird mix of guilt and obligation. But I couldn't really see her much, because her mother intercepted me. Elizabeth went off. She accused me of being the reason her daughter was in that state. She screamed that I was cold-hearted, and that my refusal to love her had broken Jalen's spirit. She actually looked me in the eye and said I should have been the one in the hospital bed. I responded back at her. I don't even remember what I said. I was just so angry, and she tried to slap me. I managed to avoid it, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I just turned and ran. I drove back home, without even talking to my dad. A few weeks ago, my grandma on my dad's side died. My siblings and I didn't really have a relationship with her because she assaulted my mom when she was pregnant with Ashton and then moved away. She was a nightmare. She always said my mom cheated, and all of us were fair babies even though we were proven to be his. But this doesn't apply to Jalen. Jalen is a carbon copy of her when she was younger. The same eyes, the same sharp nose. So my grandma really favored her over any of her other grandkids. When we attended the funeral was the first time we all saw each other in a very long time. The air was thick, like you could cut it with a knife. We mostly kept cordial for the occasion, standing in our separate groups. But then, as people were starting to head to their cars, Jalen approached me. She looked small. She was shaking, and her eyes were completely bloodshot. Before I could say a word, she just collapsed into my arms, sobbing. It was loud, ugly crying. She told me that over the last year, she realized just how depressed and miserable it made her to have been denied a relationship with her siblings. She said she finally saw how wrong she and her mother had treated us. She wanted to make amends and start fresh. She also said that our grandma's death had fully broken her because we had our maternal grandparents and lots of cousins, but she only had us. She felt completely alone in the world. I held her hands. They were ice cold. I looked at her, and for a split second, I saw a girl who was just as much a victim of our parents' mess as I was. But then, I saw the face of the woman who tried to slap me. I heard the echoes of every insult thrown at my mother in that kitchen 30 minutes away. I felt the weight of 20 years of being forced to play happy family while my real family was being insulted. I told her that I understood how bad she must have felt in that moment and that I was sorry that she was in a situation like that. I told her it wasn't her fault for being born from an affair. But then I had to be honest. Jalen, I personally can't give you the relationship you crave, I said. My voice was low, but it felt like it was booming in the quiet of the cemetery. I still struggle to see you as anything more than the product of the affair my dad had. To me, you aren't family. You're a reminder of everything that went wrong. I wish things had been different, and I wish our parents had made better choices, but truth is, for the moment, I can't bring myself to be a part of your life or have you be a part of mine. She looked at me like I had just stabbed her. Her face went totally slack, and the sobbing just stopped. It was a silence that felt heavier than the crying. I couldn't look at her anymore, so I just turned and went away. I felt like crying myself, but I also felt this massive weight lift off my chest. I couldn't keep that in anymore. I went to my car and went home. I haven't spoken to my dad in person since that day. I've been so anxious ever since, jumping every time my phone pings. My mom told me I was very harsh. She thinks I should have phrased it better because Jalen is fragile right now. Most of my friends agree with me, saying she needs to stop demanding a relationship and better herself. But one friend told me I was very cruel and that if her stepsister ever said those things, she would crash out. Am I the a-hole? Update. Hello everyone, I know it's been a long time since my post, and I wanted to update as soon as I could with the advice I got from here. But these past weeks have been very chaotic with school and my family, and I haven't had the energy for anything else. Now I feel ready to write it all down. I'll try to explain everything in order, but just know that everything was happening all at once, and my brain can only handle so much at a time. Morgan called me the next day after I posted this and didn't even ease into it. She just went ahead asking what exactly I told Jalen because people were telling her different things. I told her the truth, that I can't give her the relationship that she wants and that I don't see her as a sister. Then she started in on how sometimes you don't have to say everything exactly as you feel it, that there are ways to say things, especially when someone is not doing okay mentally, and that I wasn't particularly new to dealing with mental health problems. And that really irritated me, because when were we ever given softness growing up? I said nobody cared that we were being dragged there every weekend, listening to Elizabeth make vile comments about Mom, having to act polite while being insulted to our faces. Then she snapped back that I have no idea how much shit she had to deal with before she even turned 10, trying to shield the rest of us, that not everything happened in front of me, and that I don't even know the half of it. And then it just spiraled into a screaming match, because pulling out old stuff just makes you feel 13 again for some reason. She even threatened to call Ruth to back her up in what she was saying, to prove I have no reason to be acting like a martyr because, according to her, I had the easy part, having the three of them like hawks around me. I honestly don't know how she could be so wrong, considering I spent my late adolescence crying every single weekend I had to go, and begging them to come with me because I couldn't handle it anymore. I want to think she just said it because she was angry. I know she carries a lot of resentment because she had to do it alone because, even though Ruth is only 1 year younger, she was always pretty much on the more innocent side and just dealt with everything more quietly, while Morgan was the one who spoke up every single time. I know both of them are still pretty angry, even if they hide it better now that they have husbands and houses and everything. Talking to my dad was way worse. I went to his job to pick him up and talk on the way to his home, because I know his wife would be there, and that was the only way I could talk with him alone, and because I wanted to clear up what happened at the funeral and needed to say everything to his face. I asked him why he never shut Elizabeth down when she talked badly about Mom or us, why he never drew hard boundaries with them like he did with us, why keeping the peace always meant we were the ones who were adjusting, and why, even after having all of their kids say they wouldn't see him if his wife was there, it didn't click for him that maybe his wife was really the problem. He did the whole forehead rub and said he was so tired of everything and everyone that he was trying to maintain stability, that Jalen didn't deserve to grow up feeling unwanted, and that, you're not going to believe this, Elizabeth is his wife and he will always be by her side, even when she's wrong, and would never let anything come in between them. I asked him, how can you love someone who has destroyed every single relationship in your life because you refuse to put her in her place? And he just said I didn't know anything about her and couldn't judge her because everyone has their little things. In that moment, I wanted to swerve and crash the car because what do you even mean? That honestly fucked with my head more than anything else he's ever said, because suddenly it's not a mistake he made years ago that he can't fix now, it's a present-day choice he isn't embarrassed to continue making, and it honestly repulsed me. When I was little, I was so sad because I thought my dad was being abused by this woman because he couldn't possibly be okay with her doing all that stuff, and surely he was planning on divorcing her any moment. Came to find out, he is completely fine with this and isn't bothered by the fact all of his kids completely hate him. I also talked with my mom because, as many of you said, her passiveness when it came to what we endured was not okay, and she also needed to be held accountable. I asked why she didn't push harder legally, why she didn't take Dad and Elizabeth to court when lines were crossed, and let us handle comments like that as kids. She said she didn't want our childhood to turn into constant legal warfare, that she thought dignity and calm would protect us more than dragging everything through court. But I said dignity doesn't stop people from humiliating you, and that she just acted cowardly because she didn't want to be seen as the bitter ex-wife. She just didn't respond after that, and went to her room. I don't know if it was fair to say it, but that's just how I feel after being villainized by my own mother for responding to abuse. After that, it was mostly peaceful for about a week and a half, but Jalen asked to meet a few days later, and for some reason I agreed to meet in the parking lot of the train station in my town because honestly I don't want to set foot in hers anymore. It was just so awkward at first because we sat on one of those metal benches where everyone passes by you and listens. It was so public and exposed, I kind of wanted to just leave. She said she's in therapy now and that she realizes her mom filled her head with stuff about us blaming her for existing, that she spent years thinking that if she tried harder to become better than my siblings, I'd eventually choose her. I told her I never wanted or had the intent of choosing anyone, that I was just trying to survive in that house alone for 4 years while my siblings were old enough to stop going. And yes, I know they had their own versions of hell, but I was physically there all by myself dealing with Elizabeth not only in person but also on my phone on the weekdays because I wasn't allowed to block either of them, or I would be made to come every weekend, not just every other. She told me I've always treated her like the symbol of the affair instead of a person, and I said this isn't about the affair, it's about how I was treated, about the comments, and about trying to alienate and isolate me from my family. But if I'm completely honest, the comments on my previous post and what she said made me reflect on how much of my stance was about the principle of the infidelity and how much is about the actual behavior, because on the worst days, my mind always came back to her being born from an affair that destroyed my family, and that made me even angrier than before. The conversation started getting heavy because I had never seen her this vulnerable, and honestly, it made me extremely uncomfortable because she was constantly alternating between crying, shaking, or getting angry. She also said I have the luxury of standing on a moral high ground because I wasn't the one labeled the affair baby my entire life, and that I had other family, and she didn't. But I said I'm not the one responsible for giving her the family her own parents created from a broken one, and that her own actions ensured none of us wanted to have a relationship with her as adults. After that, she just asked if there's genuinely nothing in me that wants to try, and I said I don't want to force anything just to make everyone else comfortable, and that she should focus on sorting out things with her mom and not me. Also, I got the impression she was using a lot of therapy speech on me because she kept saying how hating her made me feel that I'm the one in control, so I could keep punishing her forever, but nothing would undo what happened. After that, we just said goodbye because it was getting late, and honestly, we were just going in circles. A few days after, Ashton sent me a screenshot of a chat request from Jalen saying she's sorry for everything and that she hopes he'd be open to maybe grabbing a coffee someday and talking about everything. He just said, "Look at this." And when I asked him if he was going to respond, he said, I'll think about it. Which kind of makes me angry because if he's open to reconciliation, I don't know where that leaves me with the rest of them. I also talked with Ruth about everything. She's the most detached one, but that's just her personality. She just said life's too short to make this our defining trait, and that for so many years it looked like this was the only thing that kept us close, not shared interests, just circling each other like wounded animals. She also said that both me and Jalen were acting from ego, and we're so young to make this our hill to die on. I told her about the message from Jalen to Ashton and asked her if she would be open to communication one day, and she said, and I quote, "I don't know what I'm going to have for dinner today. What makes you think I know what I'm going to do tomorrow? Maybe if the wind changes." Then there's Will, Morgan's husband, who I've known since I was like 6 and honestly feels like another brother to me. I ended up talking to him in my car because I wanted to show him how I've decorated it because it was originally his old car that both of them gave to me as a present on Christmas since they were getting a new one. He said he didn't want to get involved because he's technically an in-law and he's seen enough through the years, but from his perspective, this says more about me than about Jalen, that he loves me very much and needs me to let go because it feels like secondhand anger, that I stopped having contact almost 4 years ago, and it still manages to upset me. He's been around since the beginning, and he's watched Morgan fall apart and put herself back together. He's heard things I probably don't even know about. That set me off because, yes, Morgan absolutely suffered, but at the end of the day, she stopped going right after she turned 18, and I was just there until it was my turn. He said that pain wasn't a competition, and then we just went back inside and continued like nothing happened because Morgan was already on edge about something at work, and both of us knew this would set her off. So right now, no one is really taking sides. We're just exhausted and want to pretend like nothing happened, and I get it, they're older and have far more complicated lives than I do, but that doesn't exempt them from being just as involved as I am. I just know for the moment I'm going to try to focus on the things and people I love and stop worrying about the past. Thanks for reading this long rant. I know it's a lot and really ambiguous, but things like this take time and are extremely mentally taxing. Thanks also for all the encouraging words on my last post, and even to the meaner ones because they help me try to open my mind to all the possibilities. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.